Hello my loves. Can you believe we're already a fourth of the way through 2026? Because I can't.
Hello darkness, my old friend.
Anyway, let's talk about books. I want to talk about everything I've read this month. Guys, I have not read a single romantasy this month. And I read 2 non-fictions. Who am I? With that being said, the 2 non-fictions, they're not memoirs, they're like memoir adjacent. So whether you like count that as like real non-fiction, I don't really give a shit. I read 2 non-fictions. At the same time, I haven't actually read a huge amount this month. I'm still struggling to read a bit. Is anyone else feeling the same? I don't know what it is. Just at the moment, it's difficult. It's difficult to focus. It's difficult to pick what to read. Yeah, it's just hard. But we have 6 books to talk about. And do you know what? There's quite a few 5-star reads in here. It was a solid month. Even though most of my reading was done in the last like 2 weeks of the month, it was still a pretty solid month. I'm just gonna get straight into it because otherwise we know me, we will be here all day. The first book I read this month was Why Cheese by Ellen Minton. This is a silly little book about 4 cheesemen who come to life at night and fall in love with the grandniece of a cheese shop owner. It's just yeah, that sounds about as bizarre as it was. This is a non-serious, fun little romance about a woman called Violet who has a quite controlling, quite emotionally abusive mum, and when her great uncle dies, she inherits his cheese shop. She's quite surprised by this. She wasn't expecting to inherit the cheese shop, but she sees this as an opportunity to get away from her mother. So her plan is to sell and then use the money to like move somewhere else, travel, just be away from her mum. Violet also has OCD. Quite a lot of serious themes for a silly book, because the main premise is that when she arrives at the cheese shop, 4 men are randomly there, but they're only there at night, and during the day they turn into cheese. They are cheese shifters, were cheeses, if you will. She has to try and navigate running this cheese shop, selling this cheese shop, while these 4 cheesemen don't want her to and are all very attracted to her. I did actually thoroughly enjoy this book. The more I've thought about this book since reading it, the more I've been like, you know what, that was a good time. I rated it 3 stars. I think this is quite similar to like the Forked series that I read, where I just don't feel like I can justify rating it higher, because objectively, was it good? No. But did I laugh and have a fun time? Yes. But then I look at some of the other books that I rate 4 stars and I'm like, no, I can't put you in the same category as that. I think 3 stars is fair for a wonderful experience. This book did a good job at making me care about these characters. Like, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting to just laugh and for it to be like, you know, rom-com-esque. I really cared about these characters. I cared about these cheesemen, and I cared about Violet, and I hated her stupid mum. Got quite angry at one point at her mum. I was concerned she was gonna hurt one of the cheesemen's feelings, and he was like the cutest of all the cheesemen. All of the cheesemen do have distinct personalities. They don't all just like bleed into one cheesy man. Ex-highwayman cheese, who's just like, which one was that? That was Cam, who's just like really flirty, like that's his personality, that he's flirty, he doesn't take anything seriously. Then we had Rock, who's like the really serious one, he's like the leader, he's grumpy, he doesn't like Violet at first, but like obviously he does. Bree, who is the cutest, he's so sweet, he's so shy, he just likes painting. And then Chetty, who is just a big idiot. Genuinely, that's his whole personality, and I have such a soft spot for big idiot characters when they're just dumb, but like really well-meaning and really sweet. And like, despite all of that, like the whole thing being, is Violet gonna sell? Is she gonna stay with the cheesemen? Is she gonna escape her mom? Why are the cheesemen to begin with? Despite all of that and like the quite silly plot, I do actually think the serious themes were done decently well. I was quite surprised. When I read that it said Violet had OCD, I was like, oh, here we go. It's gonna be awful. Like, she's just gonna clean things sometimes, or she's just gonna be like, my socks need to be in a certain order. But no, it was actually a decent like depiction. It's a part of the book, but that's not the main theme of the book. So obviously it's not gonna be like super fleshed out and super super like in-depth, but it was not stereotyped like it quite often is, and there was an understanding of the thoughts behind the actions rather than just, I like things clean. Do you know what? This was just a good book. It was just a good book, and unironically I would recommend it if you just want silly, cheesy fun. If you do want to see like more in detail my thoughts on it, my reactions while reading it, and also like you don't want to read it but you just want to know the plot of what happened, then I did do a whole video on it. I would just like to take a brief moment to appreciate and pay some recognition to my favourite comment on my White Cheese video from Anna. 5 stars, hilarious, thank you so much. So go and watch that if you are interested in the adventures of the Cheese Man and Violet.
Meats and cheeses, always pleases.
The next book I read, I think it's probably going to be one of my best books of the year, one of my favourite books of the year, easily. This is Fagin the Thief by Allison Epstein. This was such a good book, okay? This was 5 stars. This was easily 6 of Crows tier book. I had actually been meaning to read this for such a long time. I kept borrowing it from the library last year and then just not getting around to it. Here's the thing about me. I feel like I've mentioned before, so some of you, I think you guys might already know. I love Fagin. Fagin is one of my favourite characters in, I was going to say like in all of literary history, but actually most of the reason for my love for Fagin is thanks to the legend that was Ron Moody.
Shut up and drink your gin!
I love Fagin so much, and this is like the backstory for Fagin that we all wanted. Maybe just I wanted, but I think all of us wanted. And the reason as well I'm like hesitant to say that Fagin is one of my characters in literary history is because obviously Fagin in like Oliver Twist, the original source text by Charles Dickens, is a highly contentious and controversial character, and for good reason, because he is by all accounts one of the most stereotypical anti-Semitic characters ever. Despite the alterations that Charles Dickens made like later in the book, it didn't really do anything. He's just like a pure villain and in a really unsavory, offensive way. Now obviously I am not Jewish, so this is just my opinion on this, which may not really mean much, but I feel like this did a wonderful job still incorporating the fact that he is Jewish, because I feel like trying to completely erase that and just have him as a completely different character also doesn't really solve the problem of the original Charles Dickens character. So this incorporating that and actually showing what life was like, I have no idea how historically accurate this is. I did read the author's note at the end and it looks like she did do a lot of research, but I have not done my own research. The depiction of actually like the Jewish communities were like in Victorian London, and then actually Fagin leaving that community to go out into wider London and then experiencing like the discrimination that he experienced and the assumptions that people made on him, whilst him still being a thief, was really well done in my opinion. It just added so much to his character because I don't think fundamentally it changed him that much. Yes, it did soften him a little bit. Yes, it did change some parts of the original novel so that he's not just horrific and bad and has no redeeming qualities. It actually turned him into like, you know, a human with flaws, and his main flaw being that his main driving factor is survival, and that can at times make him incredibly selfish and somewhat inclined to maybe betray other people, but you can still see that he cares about certain people. You can still see that he has thoughts other than that. He is not entirely just this awful person. Although there were some changes from the original, the way that Allison wrote it felt very fitting and realistic, like it could just slot into the plot, like how he grew up, how he got into thieving and pickpocketing, and just the way his little gang developed was very interesting. We also see a lot more of Bill Sikes in this book, and look, I hate that guy. So at first I was like, I actually really don't care about Bill Sikes. That in itself was interesting too, because not only did we get to see more of Fagin and how he developed in response to Bill, but also we got to see like, why is Bill the way he is? I don't think it fully explained it, but it was interesting. My main criticism would be that like Dodger was hardly in it, and other than Fagin, Dodger is the best character. I feel like he could have been in it earlier, but anyway, he was still there, so it's fine. I just felt like this was very well written. I felt like I could really imagine all of the places in London. Like it had that very vivid imagery and description, not to the rambling 2-page long sentences that Charles Dickens does. does. But it still had that really vivid like description of stuff so that I could really imagine everything and where we were, and like as if we were going through these little darker corners of London, which I love that setting. It's one of my favourite settings. That felt like it was really well done. There was like these other side characters that just felt really well done, some of them having been in the original and some of them not. I did put off finishing it for a while, not because I wasn't enjoying it. I was enjoying it a lot. I put off finishing it because I remembered that the original book that this is based on does not end with Fagin and Dodger skipping off into the sunset as it does in the musical, and I remembered what actually happens at the end of the book, and I was like, oh, I don't feel emotionally well enough to read that right now. It was fine. I got through it. It was fine. And I think I've said this many times, I think that's a sign of a good book. If it's bringing up emotion, if it's bringing up anticipation, even if it's negative anticipation for me, it's good. Then we have another 5-star hitter. This is Sidesplitter by Phil Wang. My notes literally just say, explain who Phil Wang is, explain that I am in love with him. If you don't know, Phil Wang is a comedian. I don't remember where I first saw him. It was maybe like Mock the Week or something. And then he had the good luck of being on the best ever season of Taskmaster.
Sorry, I didn't shit on your face.
He's a comedian that I've always been like, I find you really funny, I really like you, but I'd never then like checked out further particularly, and I was just wanting something chill to listen to in the evenings when I was like trying to wind down. So he makes it very clear that this is not a memoir, but it has like memoir elements to it. It's basically a discussion on culture and the experience of being mixed race. So it like starts with him like talking about his experience of like growing up in Malaysia and like feeling like he didn't fully fit in because his mum's white, and then being quite excited when he then moved to the UK because like everyone in Malaysia could like sense his whiteness, feeling like, oh, okay, this is the place I'm finally gonna fit in. But then like getting to the UK and it was like the reverse situation of like everyone then being able to identify the like Malaysian and Chinese heritage from his dad's side, and then sort of commenting on, I suppose, like differences in culture, experience. There's a whole bit about relationships, nature, family, like there was so many different like elements of it, and it was just a very interesting discussion because obviously being someone who is white, has grown up in England, has never had those experiences, it made me think about things in sort of maybe ways that I hadn't before. And although I suppose like that can be quite a serious topic, especially, you know, given the landscape of the world we live in now, it felt like lighthearted and cozy, probably because he is a comedian, so it was also very funny.
Okay, I've just had to cut out so much of me waffling because my brain wasn't really working very well on the day when I filmed this, and I just couldn't really explain what I meant. But I think what I was trying to say was that I found this book refreshing because it felt so normal. It felt like a normal conversation about race and culture, and unfortunately that feels like a rarity these days. It feels like most conversations about race are dominated by the loudest, most hate-filled voices, and so it almost felt like a nice surprise to just hear a normal discussion and conversation about it, which is sad that that's the case, but it was really nice to have a reminder that it is possible to have conversations like that aren't just horrible. Not that I think Phil Wang would ever be horrible in that way, it's just that when you experience and are exposed to so many really loud voices like that, you forget sometimes that not everyone's like that. It shouldn't be refreshing, but it did feel refreshing to me, and I think that is one of the reasons I enjoyed it so much.
I didn't want this book to end. It was a really nice, like, getting cozy in the evening, just like listen to Phil Wang talking to me. I love Phil Wang so much. This book did remind me of how much I love him. Then we come to the book, which is not really a book. It's on Goodreads, it's on Storygraph, and I got it on Audible, so I'm counting it as a book. And this is The Man on the Run. It's like clips from an interview from a recent documentary that was done about Paul McCartney, and the interviewer, Morgan Neville, he's not really part of the listening experience. He will occasionally ask a question, but for the most part, you are just listening to Paul McCartney. Again, it feels kind of memoir-y, but it's not a memoir. He's just talking about the experience post-Beatles, trying to set up Wings and just like adjusting to life post that. Here's another thing you need to know about me. I love Paul McCartney.
No, actually, we're just good friends.
I spent a good amount of my teenage years being in love with Paul McCartney.
No, actually, we're just good friends.
I haven't really listened to the Beatles recently. I don't know, I've just gone back into different areas of music and interest in things like that. I just wanted something kind of easy to listen to while I was doing my nails, and I'd been meaning to watch the documentary anyway, and then I saw this and I was like, that sounds like a perfect afternoon listen. And you know what it was? This was another 5 stars. It just felt like he was sat down talking to you, and I would love to sit down and talk to Paul McCartney. Actually, that's a complete lie. I would probably I was about to say, I would probably shit myself from fear. I mean that literally. I would love to sit down and have a conversation with Paul McCartney, even though I would be terrified. It was a period of his life where, I'll be completely honest, as much as I absolutely love Paul McCartney, I haven't actually listened to Wings very much. The first McCartney album is one of my favourite albums of all time, and he does talk about it a little bit in that. He is mainly talking about his experience, like trying to set up a new band when actually previously kind of all of that was done for him. There were parts of it that I don't think he meant them to be funny. They were really quite funny. It was just like him talking about him and Linda moving to Scotland and like being really isolated from everyone, which obviously I appreciate would have been very, very different to like what his life was like before, and talking about them like bringing up their kids and him being like, yeah, like I taught them to read myself. Like, you know, usually you'd have like a tutor to do that, but no, I did that. And I was like most other parents. Paul? It was just something about the way he was saying like these normal things that he was doing. Like he was talking about putting up shelves and like doing DIY around the house, and I was like, just like normal people. It was just really funny. Some parts of it were really funny. He is very funny. He's a wonderful man. I love him. I did cry for, I want to say, the entirety of the last 20 minutes while listening to this. I had to stop doing my nails and just sit there and cry. I mean, I was going through a particularly emotional period of the month anyway. I do genuinely love Paul McCartney and the Beatles music so much that sometimes certain songs, not even like emotional songs, I will sometimes just start crying because I love them so much. That capacity for emotion in relation to him is already, you know, a higher threshold anyway. And then yeah, I was feeling quite emotional as it was. The day they did the interview was the anniversary of John Lennon's death. They were talking about that and him finding out about him dying. He mentioned about Linda getting ill, and there's just certain ways they'd cut it and edited it. It was just very emotional. I cried a lot, but it was really, really good. If you like Paul McCartney, I would really recommend. Oh, it was just great. It was just great. Okay. Moving very dramatically away from the love of my life, Paul McCartney.
No, actually, we're just good friends.
I read Shy Girl by Ballard. I'm sure you've all heard about this book. It has been very, very prevalent in just media, the news generally, especially over like the past few weeks to a month, because the publication of it has been cancelled in America. It had already been published here in the UK, but they are, I think, suspending any further publication of it because of allegations of AI use. I saw one article saying that there have been allegations that up to like 70% of it was written by AI. I'm actually gonna record a full video about this book and like a full in detail review. I am not in any way qualified enough to say whether I think this book was written by AI or not. I didn't give this a rating because it felt unfair to give it a rating based on like everything going on around it. I think this book has a really interesting premise. It could have been really good. I don't think it was as bad as I was expecting it to be, especially the first, I want to say like 60% of it, I don't think was as bad as I was expecting it to be. I think some of the people I'd seen opinions of previously had read it when it was self-published, and I believe it has been edited since then. The response that Ballard herself gave in regards to the AI allegations was that it was her editor who used AI and rewrote some parts of it. I don't know. I'm not going to comment on that. It's speculation. I couldn't tell you whether this book was written with AI or not. I have no idea. All I will say is the first 60%, I was like, I can kind of see what people are talking about in terms of some of the criticisms of like repetitive words and kind of odd descriptions of things that don't really make sense. And then we got to like, 60, 70%, and it was like it just took a nosedive. It was like all of a sudden it just got awful. Suddenly, the repetitive descriptions of things, the overused adjectives were just everywhere. And like, yeah, they'd kind of been there before, but they weren't there as much. And like, it didn't feel annoying. When we got to that part, I started getting annoyed reading. There was one chapter specifically, it wasn't a very long chapter, where the word raw was used. It felt like every other sentence. It's difficult because it felt like, when I first started reading it, I was like, this feels like an author who is trying to write poetically. This feels like an author who is overusing flowery language in a way that sometimes makes sense. I can kind of see what you're doing, but also sometimes it just doesn't. And actually, if you'd written that a little bit simpler, it would have had more of an impact. It would have sounded better. It felt like that for a lot of it. Interestingly though, so it got really shit in like the last 30%. And then in the epilogue, it was fine again. The epilogue is from a completely different character's point of view. I realised I haven't told you at all what this book is about. The main character, Gia, is experiencing financial difficulties. She's out of a job. She's been unemployed for a while. She's struggling to get another job. She's not going to be able to pay her rent very soon. And her solution to this is to try and find a sugar daddy. So she goes on a website to like advertise herself as a sugar baby, and she finds this guy. And then after like meeting him a few times, what he asks her to do is be his dog for 8 hours a day and just like live as his pet. And then she just kind of starts going a bit feral. Like, that's the premise. So we get the whole thing through Gia, and then the epilogue is from someone else who is relevant to the story, kind of, but it's a completely different character. And the writing did feel completely different. There were not anywhere near as many unnecessary adjectives or overused words. It was a lot clearer and plainer, which then I was like, okay, so was that writing style just for Gia? And like, now because this is a different character, you can write in a different way? Was it AI? I don't know. I can't tell you. The main word I would use to describe this book was shallow. It just felt very shallow. It felt like it was undercooked. It felt like it needed a little bit more in the oven. I don't really know what my thoughts are on this book, which is why I'm going to do a whole separate video, because I feel like I need some time to think about this. I only finished this at this point like a couple of days ago. I would be really interested if any of you have read it, like what your thoughts were. I don't know, I just find this so interesting that this book ended up getting cancelled, because there's been a lot of books that have been accused of AI, and none of them, I don't feel like, have then had the backlash that this one has. If you're interested in my full thoughts, I think it'll be next week's video. I didn't intend for this to happen, but moving away from a like bad human to animal transformation story and moving into a good human to animal transformation story, the last book I read this month was Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. Another thing you need to know about me: I love Franz Kafka, but more importantly, I love Gregor Samsa. I love Gregor Samsa so much. He is one of my favorite literary characters of all time, easily. This was a reread, and I did just want something comforting. I'd been talking to a friend about classics that we both wanted to read and or reread, and she hadn't read The Metamorphosis, and I was like, oh my god, you need to read it. It's so good, you need to read it. And it made me want to reread it. The Metamorphosis, if you don't know, is about my love Gregor Samsa, who he works really hard for his family. He is the main breadwinner. His dad like failed a business and it's racked up a lot of debt, and so he is working off this debt through this. He's like a traveling salesman, and some of the debt is owed to the company he's employed by. Basically does nothing but provide for his family. And then one day he wakes up from uneasy dreams to find himself transformed in his bed into a giant monstrous vermin / insect / cockroach, depending on the translation you read. There's a lot of speculation on what the metaphor allegory is here for why he turns into a monstrous vermin. My personal thought is that he, providing for his family for such a long time, they have just been using him. They see him as beneath them, just something to be used, like a vermin, you might say. And so this is a physical manifestation of that. He is also depressed, in my opinion. Some of the passages where he is becoming more of an insect is, I think, very relatable as a depressed person. I just love this little bug boy. I think I said this the first time I read it and reviewed it on here. My absolute favourite thing is Gregor waking up, realising he is a giant insect, and his first thought being, how am I going to get to work? If that isn't relatable in the current climate that we live in, I don't know what is. This is another book I had to stop reading because I thought I was going to start crying on the train while reading it. I was getting too sad over my little bug boy and his family being horrible to him. Like, if I'd been at home would have been fine. But I was on my way to work on the train. I was like, I can't turn up to work, mascara streaked down my face, and everyone be like, are you okay? And for me to just be like, yeah, I'm just sad over my bug boy. I'm sorry, I'm fine. I think I read this straight after the Paul McCartney one. It was the emotional point in the month. Did I say this was 5 stars? Yet again, I don't think my rating of this will ever change. This is, I would confidently say, my favorite book of all time. I love Franz Kafka. That's everything I've read this month. We ended on a high note. I mean, there was a lot of good books this month, actually. I feel like I picked books well, picked books that I knew I was going to enjoy. I'm going to try and continue that. As much as we all know, I like to read a book purely to get angry at it, I do also enjoy reading good books. As always, I would love to know what you've been reading, what you've been enjoying, what you've been hating, what has been your top book of the month, what's been your worst book of the month, everything. I'd love to know. I'm going to go and try and decide what my next read will be because I still haven't decided. That's all for me today, so I hope wherever you are, you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.